Howdy, howdy, friends, and welcome back for another edition of the Wisco Movie Watchers podcast, brought to you by PTE Creative. As always, not always, I'm flying solo today. That's right, I'm your host, Evan Davies. Today, we don't have Dylan with us. We're doing a little bit of a different episode because schedules didn't work out, so I got to go and check out the new Gladiator II by myself to give you a great review today. So that's what we're going to be doing. We're going to be reviewing the new Gladiator II. I'm going to do my best with no spoilers. If I do throw a spoiler in there, in the edit, we'll at least try to throw you something, throw you a bone, but I don't think I'll be spoiling anything too relevant to the film as to spoil the plot. But we're going to go ahead and review this movie and have a heck of a lot of time, a lot of fun. You're going to get this episode a day early, so isn't that just great and fun? So let's start off with Gladiator II. This movie, I want to say right away, I actually enjoyed myself. I was prepared not to enjoy myself whatsoever. I did not rewatch Gladiator 1 previous to this movie. I would probably suggest doing so, not because it's necessary, but I think there's a few little story beats that are enriched if you have that fresh in your memory. So I would suggest possibly, if you really do have an interest in going and catching this movie, go watch the previous one. This isn't a sequel that is necessary to watch it, but a lot of the emotional weight is helped in this film if you have Gladiator 1 fresh in your mind. So I would say that right off the bat as a big little token for it. Now, there's a couple of things that I think are really positive, and then there are some things that need some work. But I enjoyed myself, ultimately. I was ready not to, but I thoroughly enjoyed this, actually. And part of the reasons for that is the performances. I think Paul Mescal does a really good job in his role as that main character. There are some obvious things that, as a fan, you could guess beforehand, but I'm not going to go into that because, again, we're not giving spoilers, but there's something you could probably figure out too. But Paul Mescal actually becomes quite a good lead here and has a little bit of a character difference enough from Russell Crowe's performance that it does not feel as though it's just, oh wow, we're just trying to do Russell Crowe 2.0 here. So I do think there's some nuance there that is quite beneficial. Meanwhile, on the other side, Denzel Washington also just does a really phenomenal job in this movie. He's probably the main driver in terms of what's really going to engage somebody, is Denzel Washington's portrayal of his character, which is actually pretty cool. So I would say those two performances are great. But also, Pedro Pascal, really enjoyable. This is a very middle of the road in terms of what you expect Pedro Pascal to do. This is what he's doing. This is a Pedro Pascal role for anyone who likes Pedro Pascal. You're going to be happy in this movie. Do I think it's groundbreaking for him? No. But do I think it's what we kind of all want with Pedro Pascal in the current milieu of the world? Yeah, I think that's what it is. He plays a good, honorable hero type character seemingly all the time. And even when he doesn't, there's still so many redeeming qualities to that character, such as Joel from The Last of Us in the HBO series, that you still root for him and want good things for him. You're not going to get much different here from Pedro Pascal. A lot of hero role here. Connie Nielsen also does a very great job. Those are your four pretty big players. Joseph Quinn, on the other hand, not a lot for him to do, nor does Fred Hetchinger, I believe is his name. So those two don't have a ton in the movie. Joseph Quinn certainly has more than Fred Hetchinger does, but at the same time, or Herchinder, I can't remember what his last name is in the moment. My apologies to him. No disrespect to him, because I think he does a good job, but neither does a ton to do in this movie. It's far more based in the four characters that I've already kind of stated we're going through. But overall, the performances were quite good and quite enjoyable. That, I think, is a huge positive. A second big positive for me, I think, is just the overall atmosphere that is built. You really feel like you're going straight back in this decaying form of what we already saw of Rome. This very decadent period in which there is an atmosphere here in which you feel the plight of the Roman people, even as the empire can be seen as this very decadent force. Those are some really good positives that I think work well in this film and really help garner something different. Now, if I'm going to draw a comparison just for characters to kind of help you understand, if Russell Crowe's character kind of went through the T'Challa arc of responsibility, Paul Mescal's character kind of goes through more of a Killmonger style character training. That doesn't mean he ends up in the same place. That's not what I'm saying at all. But for those that are looking for a comp to understand it, think of kind of the way Maximus was thrown to the world is far more T'Challa-like, and Paul Mescal's is far more Killmonger-like. And they have to kind of come to terms with both those things. So those are two things I would say to really, or that's something I would say to really understand what I'm trying to say here with these characters overall. Now, some things that the film does need to work on. I don't think it goes enough in one direction as a sequel. Now, what I mean by that is this. I think sequels have generally two ways to go. They got to go balls to the wall new, or especially a movie like this that's getting a sequel 20 plus years after the original, it really needs to harken back to the old and really, really just bake in that, soak in that, and be that again. I think we get closer to that new direction here, but I don't think it's enough to really give this full perspective of what the film is trying to do. But that is something I would say is somewhat of a detriment. Doesn't do enough callback to go, oh, yeah, but at the same time, it doesn't do enough to break new ground that you're like, whoa, what a brand new experience with this film and this now franchise, I guess. So those are some things to keep in mind, at least from my perspective. One thing I would say is this is about 60%, almost 2/3 of the way from the film, I very much felt as though we're not really breaking new ground here. We're not really doing much new here. It feels pretty close to retread. However, that third act moves at a blazing pace and takes you to places that the original Gladiator does not go. So there is quite positive things to worry about or to think about the film, but do not be shocked if, halfway through the movie you're like, kind of the same here. It's like, it is. So those are things to keep in mind as you do it. Another thing I think this film could use some help with is it trusts its audience a little too much. And what I mean by that is when we are harkening back to the past and details of the past and remembering those things, the reason I said you should go watch the original if you're going to come back and watch Gladiator II is there are some moments that are super helpful to have that. And instead of going in that moment, instead of being able to go, oh, I can see the tie here and there, there's a lot of, the audience will know it, and they just kind of skip by, and they don't give you that extra 15 to 20 seconds to really get you to go, oh, okay. In an odd way, it's somewhat of the modern film take, in which too often we find films are made with too much trust with the audience that everyone will know everything, or we have to spoon feed them because they won't know anything. It rides this weird middle ground like an older film will, where it's like, they'll get it. I understood it. It's not as if I didn't understand it or couldn't get to where they wanted me to go. But I think 10, 15 seconds here or there, when they're referencing things of the past or echoing to things of the past, would really help. Just an extra 10, 15 seconds. So that, I would say, is certainly something to keep in mind while you're doing this, which is why I'd recommend Gladiator 1 go. Also, on top of that, this is, I think, the biggest detriment in the film in terms of what's just straight obviously not great. The CGI in here is not good. Much like Gladiator 1, they do use animals as a threat to the gladiators. You'll be shocked there's gladiator fights in Gladiator 2. Who would have thought? I think that's a spoiler for anybody. But a lot of the times with some of the animal fights or some of the bigger sequences in which they're showcasing those fights, it is too obvious from a 2024 lens that they're using CGI and it does not look great. It's the kind of stuff where if this film was even 10 to 15 years younger, or older, I should say, I guess, you'd go, wow, that looks pretty darn good. And okay, I see it a little bit, but I'll give it the pass. You don't have that luxury in 2024. And when it's used, I don't think it's used to its best capability. And that is something that is a little flawed, especially after going and watching other Ridley Scott films where CGI and visual effects are done really, really well. It's a little hard sometimes where it just takes you out of the movie a hair. Where, granted, I know I was going in as a critique, I was going in reviewing the film for this podcast. So, yeah, I get it. I'm looking for holes, but at the same time, I didn't have to look hard for some of them. So I would say the CGI does need a little work. So just be prepared for that as a viewer. I hate to put it in your mind and then go, oh, he's so right. Or maybe you think, he's just wrong and I don't really need that much from him. And if that's good for you, that's great. I hope that happens for you. But for me, there was a few too many scenes, especially in one. It's two gladiator battles specifically. One is one of the earlier ones, and one is supposed to be like the big grand one. And there's an overhead shot, and there's just a couple things where you're like, I don't even know if that looks three-dimensional. And that really sticks out to me right now. If you see it, you'll see it. If you don't, hopefully that's good for you to do. Those are things that I would consider detriments. Overall, though, I did enjoy this film. And I was ready not to. I was ready to just kind of go, meh. Okay. I don't know if I'm just in a Ridley Scott mood right now. One of my utter comfort movies, and I absolutely love, is his much reviled, or as in reviled by Ridley Scott terms, just kind of mid movies, as a lot of kids like to say now. It sounds so old, but one of his more mid movies that I absolutely adore and is one of my favorite comfort movies is his 2010 Robin Hood. I saw a few too many parallels of that, especially since I just watched that film a couple days ago. You know, just taking advantage of the fact that I had time and I just kind of want to zone out and watch something that I loved. There are too many parallels to that where I just went, maybe there's a little paint by numbers by Ridley Scott. But I don't think it's paint by numbers. I just think it's when you're used to something and there's similarities between what a director does, you kind of immediately harken back to it from time to time. And no way am I saying that it's exactly like all of the films. But there are some stuff where you're like, I've seen that before, Ridley. I see you. So overall, though, I really did enjoy this movie. And Paul Mescal really does shine in this. I had no introduction to his work previous, but I really enjoyed him. So overall, I'd say worth a watch. Pretty good movie. I would say it's above average to good movie. I don't think it's anything spectacular. And it won't be hitting my spoilers for about a month from now when we do our year review. I don't think it's going to be my favorite movie of 2024 unless something drastically changes within me. However, I do think I had a good experience going to the theater, and it was worth the watch, and I'd highly recommend it. If you're just going, hey, I just want to watch a good movie, I think Gladiator II can do that for you. So I would overall recommend it to you with those things in mind. But I hope you guys enjoyed this review as much as possible. Go use it to however you want to. But enjoy your day. I'm glad to get this show to you early, on time for you, so you can go enjoy Gladiator 2 however you see fit. Go watch a good movie. Maybe it's this one, maybe it's another. And enjoy your day. Peace, love, and hugs to you all. We'll catch you next week with some bonus stuff. Bye-bye!